ISIS is ramping up on two fronts, Iraq and Syria. First, CNN has learned a small contingent of U.S. Special Operations Forces is now back in northern Syria. They're advising local fighters moving against ISIS. U.S. officials declined to disclose a troop number or their location. An initial group had been there several weeks ago to conduct what was described as a series of surveys on how to proceed with the battle against ISIS. The group is part of the 50 Special Operations Forces President Obama has already approved for a so-called advisory role in Syria. And in Iraq, security forces are making headway in the quest to take back the critically important town of Ramadi from ISIS. The new Iraqi assault began by unfolding a U.S. military as a U.S. military brigade. U.S. forces provided a bridge across a branch of the Euphrates River and then pushing into the center of the city with the help from U.S. airstrikes to confront an estimated 350 ISIS fighters. But forces have a long way to go. It's believed ISIS has laid mines in buildings, laid explosive devices in the streets, an extremely dangerous situation there. Let's bring in Republican Representative Scott Perry of Pennsylvania. He's on the Homeland Security Foreign Affairs Committee. He's also a colonel in the Pennsylvania National Guard. He served in Iraq, visited Afghanistan as a U.S. congressman. Thanks very much for joining us. I guess with all these troops now engaged in military combat, this is real combat in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in Syria. Unfortunately, we should anticipate more U.S. casualties like the 6 Americans who had to come home in body bags this week.
Unfortunately, it's true, Wolf, and certainly my heartfelt condolences and thoughts and prayers are with those families, especially at this time. What I think the American people need to realize is that although the administration says this is no longer a combat zone, when you're assisting Afghan forces out on patrol, it's a combat zone for those individuals, whether they're Afghan, American, NATO forces, or what have you, and they can and will be attacked. And these are the consequences, unfortunately, of war. So we might say for a political narrative that the war is over, but if the enemy does not agree, then the war is not over. And that's the really disheartening thing. And the other portion, Wolf, too, is that a declared combat zone means certain things for families of lost soldiers and for the soldiers themselves, even though they're lost, the benefits and awards and decorations. And those things are now, they change inexorably, and those are problematic, too, for these soldiers who have lost their lives and their families who have lost their loved ones.
But I assume the 6 soldiers, airmen, the military personnel who died at the Bagram Air Base this week in that suicide attack, they will get all the they'll get all the honors that they deserve, because this is real combat, unless you know something that I don't know.
Well, once it's no longer designated a combat zone, the military sees that differently, and there are subtle changes, but they make a big difference to families. And the service member is passed, so they will never know, but it makes a difference on how things are administered, benefits and those type of things. There is a difference that goes with a combat zone designation, and people need to be aware of that.
Is Afghanistan no longer a combat zone designation?
Well, the president said that combat operations are over, and so the presumption is that those things go with that. Once you downgrade it from those, certain benefits leave with the downgrade.
That's a fair point. We're going to check into that and see if these military personnel and their families will get the honors and all the full financial benefits that they deserve, because clearly they were in combat, even if it was informally called some sort of combat zone. You make a fair point,
right,
Congressman. All the tens of billions of dollars the U.S. has spent to train and arm and equip the Afghan military, the Iraqi military, was that money thrown down the drain?
Well, not entirely, Wolf, but I will tell you this. All the training in the world doesn't mean a hill of beans if you're not willing to fight for your country. And I think we've seen this particularly in Iraq with the sectarian violence and the choosing of sides with Sunnis and Shias. They can be the best trained no matter what, but if they don't have the will and the heart to fight and place their life on the line for their country, doesn't matter how well you're trained or what equipment you have, you must stand and fight. And if they won't do that, then the other side's going to take the stuff, which is exactly what we've seen as many forces have cut and run. And that is, we find that objectionable, very objectionable, as Americans who have worked hard and paid our taxes to see that money just thrown down the drain, literally given to our enemy.
Because earlier this year in May, when a few hundred ISIS terrorists stormed Ramadi, what did the military do. They dropped their weapons, they left their armored vehicles, and they simply ran away. Same thing happened a year earlier in Mosul. They simply ran away in the face of an ISIS terrorist assault. That's not the training that the U.S. expects would result. They should stay there and fight.
That's exactly right. But we confuse training oftentimes with the will to fight and place your life on the line. And it's easy to say we've trained these people, and we have trained these people. But if they're not interested in putting their life on the line for their country, for their belief, then they're not going to do that. So we need to be careful about the terms we use and what the reality of what those terms mean.
Do you still support the U.S. spending billions of dollars to train the Iraqi and Afghan military, given the records that they have shown so far? Because a lot of people, including Republicans, say that money could be much better spent here in the United States.
Well, listen, Wolf, I think that the training is a part and parcel to a larger strategy, and I think the problem is that this strategy, if you want to call it such, has many points of failure. And so while we rely on training, we need to know that these people are willing to do the hard work and willing to work with one another. When we also have the Shias working in there and then the human rights violations against the Sunnis, that's not a complete strategy. So all the training, again, while it might be well intended, if they don't have the will to fight and fight the enemy, then it doesn't mean anything. So it's more of a comprehensive strategy, including training.
Good point. Scott Perry, the congressman from Pennsylvania, thanks very much for joining us. Merry Christmas to you and your family.
Thank you. Merry Christmas to you.